Oh, there's nothing the internet likes that like more than a big debate. And we've got what could be a huge one coming. We don't know exactly who's gonna be in it, but Joe Rogan is down to have it. On the one side, you'll have RFK Jr. running for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, and then someone. Joe Rogan has a scientist that he'd like to have debate RFK Jr. on the topic of vaccines or whatever else comes up. And that would be Peter Hotez. You might have seen over the weekend, there was this massive social media back and forth. See, the professor had put out this tweet, basically criticizing Spotify for no longer policing vaccine misinformation. That was what the professor was saying, had been on Joe Rogan's podcast. I didn't listen to the podcast. I find it impossible to believe that he would ever be party to misinformation. But anyway, the professor was mad about that. So Rogan replies and says, Peter, if you claim what RFK Jr. is saying is misinformation, I'm offering you $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you're willing to debate him on my show with no time limit. So the professor responds, you have my cell, my email, I'm always willing to speak with you. But that would be like a conversation between two people. That wouldn't be content, and thus it's worthless. So no, it needs to be content. So Joe Rogan says this is a non-answer. First of all, it is. You don't like it, it's an answer. I challenged you publicly because you publicly quote tweeted and agreed with that, swears Vice article. If you're really serious about what you stand for, you now have a massive opportunity for a debate that will reach the largest audience. To which Elon Musk replies, he's afraid of a public debate because he knows he's wrong. You see, if you don't want to go on Joe Rogan's show to debate stuff that has already been debated and debunked 1,000 times over literally years, the only reason you wouldn't want to do that is because you're a coward. There's literally no other reason to think that it might be a waste of your time, counterproductive, could open up you and your friends and family to harassment that could last for literally years, long after the other millionaires that were a part of this entire scheme have moved on to something else. There's no other reason. So Francesca, there's a lot of talk about debate. There's a lot of people that think that that's the only thing that should ever matter in politics is two people yelling at each other. And supposedly then truth will be reached. What do you think about this? Should he do it? Should someone step into his spot and debate on Joe Rogan's show?
No, they should not. Because Rogan knows where his bread is buttered. He knows that he's an anti-vaxxer, that he foments misinformation and disinformation about the vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine and others, and it pays him millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it even allows him, as the Vice article talked about, the Spotify to let him do whatever he wants, even though they say that they're gonna censor some of those episodes, and they say that their terms of service indicate that you can't say that the COVID-19 vaccine causes, autism or makes people die or blood clots or whatnot. All of it, but they never act on it. So he is above it all. And he doesn't care, he's doing this. What is it gonna do? It's gonna drive massive amounts of $100,000. I'm sorry, you're gonna make millions from that stupid debate that is not supposed to enlighten, inform anyone. Even if it were, can you at least pretend that maybe he would debate somebody who also has a medical degree? Can you at least pretend he's gonna debate somebody who also has been researching vaccines, who also helps distribute vaccines to second world countries that can't otherwise afford it, right? I mean, this guy has been doing incredible work, specifically flying in the face of Big Pharma, which they say that he's in bed with Big Pharma, but instead he's actually circumventing Big Pharma's patents to try and get like non-patented vaccines out to people who need it, who otherwise would die. And the last thing I'll say is, John, you and I both lost people in the COVID-19 pandemic, man. Every day I think about Elon and I think about Joe Rogan, and I don't wish death upon anybody. But man, oh man, would I love to trade my uncle back for one of these MFers who continues to make sure that more people like my uncle die. And more people that we all know continue to die.
You seem angry.
Yeah.
Because the geniuses don't agree with you. Geniuses like Elon Musk, who I will remind you, told people in the beginning of the pandemic that it would last like 2 weeks or whatever, 2 months. Yeah. So look, there are arguments to be made for this sort of debate. Generally, the arguments, however, are not being made by the people who are doing the debate. they say other things. There are some people who legitimately believe that debate is important, that it can persuade people, the stuff that like best case scenario debate is supposed to do. There's some people who actually believe that. However, it should not be lost on you, dear viewer, that debates like this are brand building exercises. And you can make a lot of money off of it. As Francesca pointed out, whenever a rich person for whom money means literally nothing throws around money like this, like you could do this, and if you don't do it, then that's $100,000 that could have gone to a charity. First of all, you could just donate the money to a charity, you rich a-hole. You could just do that. Joe Rogan is so rich that $100,000 is literally meaningless to him. And whenever a rich person does something like this as charity, when it obviously will result in them making more than that money, it's not charity, it's marketing. That's all it is. But that's not the issue. I don't even particularly care about Joe Rogan. Like, yes, he wants this debate. That's what his show is this sort of stuff. But the issue is that like he pitches it as, if you think that RFK Jr. is wrong about vaccines or whatever, then just come on and say how he's wrong, as if no one has done that. And I'm not, again, this isn't even fundamentally about RFK Jr. RFK Jr., all he's doing basically is, because he's not a scientist, he's not a doctor, he's repeating the sorts of things that anti-vaxxers have said for literally decades. And I mean that literally. He's repeating some of the oldest, most debunked things that anti-vaxxers have said for years and years and years. They have been disputed and debunked years and years ago. That obviously has made no difference whatsoever. It's not gonna change his mind. He's not gonna listen to scientists. So what is the point in engaging this at this point? Look, if there is a person that is in the Joe Rogan audience that at this point as an adult just isn't sure what to think, then that sucks. But I think the vast majority of the audience already knows what they believe about vaccines. You're not gonna present scientific studies, and anti-vaxxers are gonna be like, you know what, that's a good point. I didn't know about that citation. I've changed my total mind. That doesn't actually happen. That's not the objective of these sorts of debates, and it's almost never the effect of these sorts of debates. Anyway, and by the way, and it like the fact, like RFK Jr. is tapping into legitimate like anger at Big Pharma, at the system of healthcare and health insurance in the United States. Like, yes, and that by the way, a lot of that is on the Democrats. That anger is still out there. That people like Joe Rogan and not Joe Rogan, Joe Biden and other establishment Democrats aren't fixing the system, allows it to remain out there as a thing that can fester. And then some people who don't necessarily understand what they're talking about can take advantage of that. Yeah, and it's not to say that RFK Jr. doesn't have some like good point. Like he came out today and he was talking about like a plan to, combat homelessness and stuff like that. That can be good. But then there's also the stuff about, chemicals in the water turning frogs gay and poppers give you HIV and stuff like that. Like there is a demand for a better candidate. I will just say there's no, like he's not Bernie. That's my frustration with these sorts of things, basically.
Y'all should watch the Habituation Room later on at Franny Fio on my YouTube page. We're gonna get into it, but Naomi Klein had a great article, an op-ed, which is exactly what you're saying. Look, RFK makes some really good points. When he's pressed on them, when he thinks about like, hey, how would you stop homelessness? He doesn't actually have an answer. When he talks even about his bread and butter, which was climate justice or environmental justice, right? Mass extinctions, toxic water, all that. He does not believe in more regulation. He does not believe in actually trying to stop climate change. He's an absolute free market fundamentalist. He is the same. And this is all a branding exercise. And I am very curious to see if he isn't, as Roger Stone and Steve Bannon want, if he isn't the running mate for Donald Trump, which honestly I think sweetens a very, very sour pot.
I doubt it. I highly doubt it. I don't know RFK Jr. I would assume, look, he's gonna use the media that is open. And admittedly, look, CNN and MSNBC are not gonna be interested in playing ball with him, I would assume, in the same way they would with Nikki Haley or whatever. But if I were him, it would bother me that so many right wingers are so excited about your candidacy. That shouldn't make you. Doesn't mean he doesn't get to run. It's a free country. He can run if he wants to. And if he puts out plans on things like homelessness and that pushes Biden, then that's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that because Biden isn't great, obviously, and isn't good enough, that doesn't mean that, well, then we just ignore all the bad parts. And there's always hold up, Mike. I get it. We'll be moving on in a sec. Like Tulsi Gabbard had some good critiques of Biden. That doesn't mean that all of the crazy stuff she's said is no longer crazy. And if you point it out that's crazy, then you're a bad person. That's not how this should actually work. Okay.
No. And it makes it, last point is that it is very sad though that someone like RFK Jr. can step in to fill a void that other than Bernie Sanders in terms of a leading Democrat has really filled, and that Biden, Pelosi, other leading Democrats, Schumer, don't take a hint that's like, hey, people really are tired of the corporate run stuff in this country, and they're using it to fall down all kinds of horrible conspiratorial rabbit holes. Maybe we should step in here. And it's like, no, they're not going to. They're not going to step into the populist lane if it kills them.
Yeah, and that is on them, and it's a critique we've been making for multiple cycles.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.